But we've spent most of my maternity leave filming. So it's hard, it's a juggle. We can be women and we can work. And it can be very good fun. I made that decision because I love Laurie's company and I didn't want to leave her behind. And yet I didn't want to miss out on opportunities coming along. So it was a juggling act, but it has been amazing fun. Now, Laurie, who are these? The clangers. So she's my double act. These are the clangers. And I always like to show a picture of the clangers in my talks. Because the clangers are the reasons I became a space scientist. Because when I was about Laurie's age, and actually I watch the clangers again now because I've got an excuse to watch them with Laurie. When I was at Laurie's age, I used to love the clangers. I thought they were the best thing. And because at the start of every program, it's like, this is planet Earth. But now let's travel through space and visit another planet where creatures live. And so I wanted to go and visit another planet where creatures live. And the clangers are so sweet because they're little woolen creatures. And if you haven't seen them, they don't actually speak. They just go, woo, 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 woo. And when they're sad, they go, and to my sort of 2-year-old heart, that just melted me and I wanted to see the clangers. And the thing is, when I was growing up, visiting the clangers seemed quite possible. Because I was born at the beginning of the space era. So I heard about people like Yuri Gagarin. Yuri Gagarin was the first person to leave the surface of the Earth and travel into space. And so I thought, if you can do it, I can. And also, people like Neil Armstrong, oops, where's he gone? Neil Armstrong, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Those were the immortal words he said as he stepped out on the moon. And so I grew up hearing about these things. So I thought by now we'd all be living in space. And that dream hasn't come to fruition, but I still want to get out there. Now, as Joe was mentioning, I was sort of a bit more round about the middle. And so my dreams of getting into space are getting a bit more challenging, but I still want to get out there. And a few years ago, actually, I decided I was going to try and combine my television work with my desire to get out into space. And I came up with this concept of Big Brother in space. So having a Big Brother spaceship going to Mars. And actually, it seemed far-fetched at the time, but someone was recently advertising for an elder couple to actually go into space and go to the planet Mars. So these things are happening. We're at exciting times in space. But I've had a number of jobs. I think when I was growing up, I thought people went and got a job and they did it for 40 years and at the end they got a watch and they came out. But I don't think life is like that now. Most people have quite varied careers, and my career has been quite varied. Because when I got my degree, I got my PhD, and I sort of left university, Dr. Maggie, ready to take on the world, and there was a credit crunch, and there were no jobs around, and it was just so disappointing. I've studied for 7 years at Imperial College, and I've studied 7 years at university, and I can't find a job. And it was really sort of quite disheartening. So I sort of looked around, and eventually I got a job at the MOD, the Ministry of Defence. And to me this was quite, maybe a bit uncomfortable, because as a child I was a pacifist. I thought, we should banish wars, everybody should be friends. I think it's slightly more complicated than that, but those were my ideas. So to work for the Ministry of Defence. And on top of that, when I actually went for my first job, I went for the interview, and I said, okay, thank you, you've interviewed me, what would I be doing? And they said, oh, well, we can't tell you that, because you haven't signed the Official Secrets Act yet. But start, and we'll tell you later. So it was all a bit nerve-wracking. But through the MOD, I did a variety of quite interesting jobs. I was working on missile warning systems, so flying around in an aircraft and trying to actually work out what a missile looks like, so you can warn a pilot and do something about it, set off countermeasures to stop the missile from actually killing the pilot. And also I worked on handheld landmine detection. And this was the time where Princess Diana was championing this cause. And we were looking at what technology you can use, which is better than a long stick, to actually detect landmines, which actually blow off people's legs and maim people horribly. So that's another thing that I've found about science. It can make a real difference to people's lives. I think in virtually every job I've had, it's actually been sort of about people and about sort of trying to understand the world better, trying to make a world a better place. And I think science really has the ability to do that. But my favourite job was actually doing something very different. I was actually working out here at this telescope in South America. And we were working on this telescope. So this is actually the inside of the telescope, and this is the telescope itself. And it had a mirror, a primary mirror, of 8 meters in diameter. So that's 8 meters of light gathering power. Now, for an astronomer, that was just a buzz. Because when I was a kid, I made a telescope. When I was about 15, I made a telescope myself. I sort of polished my own mirror. And my telescope was about this, about 150 millimeters across. This telescope, 8 meters in diameter. I know, it's weird. Now, with a telescope that big, you've ever seen a picture of someone looking at a telescope, it's usually someone wearing a dicky bow, and they're looking through a telescope like this, and they're sort of looking at the light. But with telescopes this big, you can't do that, because there's so much light coming through, you'll probably burn your retina. So instead, what we do is we build instruments that analyse the light. And so this is just what I did. This was my baby before Laurie came along. This was VH-ROS, the bench-mounted, high-resolution optical spectrograph. Snappy, huh? But VH-ROS did a very special job. What it did is it took light from the stars and converted it into a rainbow. Because this is the spectra of a star. And when you take the spectra of a star, so you gather the light with a telescope, you feed it through a fibre to VH-ROS, and then you spread it out into its rainbow colours using prisms and gratings and things like that. And then you can analyse the light that's coming through. And I don't know if you can see those little dark lines across the picture. Those dark lines, they're critical. They can tell us what's happening. You see the rainbow, you like that? It tells us what's happening in the heart of the stars. So my dream was always to travel to the stars, but with this, I could actually look at the heart of the star. I could tell what chemical reactions were taking place because of the absorption bands. I could tell if the star was moving towards us or moving away from us. So with this, you could analyse stars. So that was my favourite job. It got me closer to the stars. So now I've built all sorts of instruments that go out into space. This is a satellite called Aeolus, which is measuring wind speed through the Earth's atmosphere. And this is the James Webb Space Telescope, the largest space telescope ever built. And I've made one of the small components that go into that, or me and my team made one of the small components that go into that. And 3,000 people across the world are working on this huge space telescope. And it's going to go into space and tell us about the universe around us. I've had a few freaky moments in my life, but I think this one was the freakiest. And I'd just like to share this picture because I was sort of a black dyslexic kid from a broken home growing up in London, and I got to meet the Queen. If I can do that, what can you do? What can you achieve? You all have potential. You have the potential to do so much. You just got to realise it and grab those opportunities and see where they take you. Now, it's quite funny because when I met the Queen, I was so nervous because I know what I'm like. I'm really clumsy. And I had this horrible vision of me, so I was meeting the Queen, and she went to curtsy. And I thought, you know, I'd curtsy, but I'd get a bit wobbly, and I'd fall over and knock over the Queen. And then the headlines in the newspaper the next day, space scientist takes out Queen, ooh-er. And so I was really nervous. And also, I couldn't work out what to wear. Because honestly, I love clothes. And it was a shopping frenzy. I went and bought 5 different dresses. I didn't wear them all at once, because that would be silly. But I went and bought 5 different dresses because I couldn't quite work out what to wear. And eventually, the day came, and I was at Buckingham Palace, and as you imagine, it's quite formal. And eventually, they called out my name to Dr. Maggie Adair Pogock for services to science and education. And I think, oh my God, that's me! Calm down, Maggie, calm down. And so I sort of went up, and then I stood in front of the Queen, and this was my moment. And so I curtsied, but then just to make sure I bowed as well. And then the Queen looks at me, and she says, the Queen looks at me, she's doing the voice. The Queen said, Sarah, what do you do? And I was so excited, I just blurted it out. Just, I'm a space scientist! And the Queen said, egg.
He's a computer programmer in an investment bank. And I'll explain what that means later on. So, how do you choose what line of work that you want to go into when you leave school? It's a really, really important decision because you're going to spend all of your adult life doing it. So you've got to find something that you like. How do you do that? Well, if you've got strong ideas of what you want to do, that's often a good thing. But if you don't, that's quite a good thing as well. Because if you really know what you want to do when you're 12 or 13, you might end up doing a career that was chosen for you by a 14-year-old. So I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I chose a flexible subject, which is computing. Now, with computing, some subjects have a very defined career path. Like if you study medicine, you pretty much end up working in the NHS as a doctor. If you study accounting, you become an accountant, a journalist. Well, you get the idea. But with computing, there isn't a particular job. There isn't. You can become a software engineer. You can work in a bank, make a lot of money in the city. Not that I make a lot of money, but some people do. You can teach it, you can develop web pages at home, working part-time. It's a very, very flexible subject. But more than programming being a career, in the future, everyone is going to have to know how to program a computer. The skills that you have if you learn how to program are useful if you go into medicine, accounting, everything. Lots of people think that there isn't any need for everyone to learn to program, because after all, we've got enough people to do it, we've got lots of apps and things, but it's not true. Everyone's going to need it. It's going to be important in every job going forward. I mean, when I was growing up, there was no internet. Imagine that there was no internet and there was no mobile phones. And now it's just everywhere. I can't even imagine my life without the internet. And so it's going to be an incredibly important skill going forward. Also, programming is fun. It's great fun. You know, when you build a piece of software, you're creating something where there was nothing before. You're doing it from scratch, like a piece of art or a piece of sculpture. And when you see somebody using a program that you've created where there was nothing before, it's incredibly satisfying. It must be like seeing somebody read your book on the tube, where when I walk past somebody's desk and they're writing a piece of software, using a piece of software that I've written. It's a brilliant feeling. So what do I mean by computer programming? Well, I think, I'm talking to Fiona about this, I think you're learning computer programming now in school, and you're using a language called BASIC. And so programming is about giving the machine a set of instructions, a set of rules to follow, and the machine will then do that for you. So it makes a lot of repetitive tasks much, much easier. Angry Birds, that's a game that I'm sure everyone's played. You know, that was programmed. Some people got together, they all sat in a room and they thought about how it was going to work, all the designers and the artists, and then they all collaborated together to make it work. And then it is, it's a program now that everyone uses. And here's a secret. Everyone can learn to program a computer. Everyone can. It's like playing the piano. You wouldn't expect everyone to be able to play the piano from scratch. You know that people who play the piano well have practiced it. And computer programming, it's just that. It's just practice. In fact, you know, when you think of it, pretty much everything's just practice. So, should we see? Let's just pile the pressure on. Let's see if we can write them. If there's Excel on this computer, I might be able to write a tiny computer program for you as we go along. Microsoft Office. There we go. Microsoft Excel. Yeah, okay. So all of these Microsoft applications have a programming language behind them, and it's called VBA, which is Visual Basic for Applications, which is basic, which is what you're already learning to do. So I'm going to put the mic down for a minute and see if we can write a little program to maybe just change the colours of some cells. It's not going to be a very useful program, but it'll serve to demonstrate. Let's see. Okay. this works, it would be awesome. Okay. You might just be there. Let's see. Who wants to see me fail? Who wants to see me make it great?
Ideas and projects, and banks lend this money that they think have the best chances of paying them back. So in this way, banks actually shape the way we live. They're an important part of society because they decide what projects are going to be built and then where the jobs and the work is going to be for everyone. Now some things, like the NHS, the National Health Service, probably work better if the government run them. But shops and restaurants, say, work better if the people involved run them. And buy and sell things by their own judgment. So bonds and shares are a way for people to vote with their money, basically. And I work in one of these investment banks. I do this sort of thing every day. I write programs for people to use to help